having a audience of 2,000, but it's all people that are relevant to you and care about your brand is way more than important than 50,000 that are just like random high school kids, whoever on the internet,
Yeah.
and they like your page because it's you did a trendy video. It's way more important to be going after your relevant audience.
Market Like a Rockstar, episode 11, you are here. My name is RPI. I'll be your host as always. Today is a special episode. I've got my first guest on the pod. I sit down with Jakob from Brush Art, a full-service agency from Downs, Kansas. We talk about influencer marketing, the transition from traditional to digital marketing, and finding a good balance between the two, as well as the importance of getting your full team on board with content creation, among other things. Check it out. Yeah, so today this is the first guest ever. Jakob from Brush Art. Jake, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you doing? This is my first podcast ever too, so a lot of firsts going on.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I should probably say, so Jake is my second cousin. Jake's mom is my cousin, and he's been working in marketing. You graduated in like 2016-ish? Is that right?
Yep, I graduated in 2016 from the University of Kansas. Basically moved back here to this small town, Kansas, Downs, Kansas, and went back to the family business. So,
yeah. And so I remember when I was a kid, and I remember your dad started coming around when I was in junior high. And I remember your mom and dad got married, and you came along when we're about 18 years apart. So I was in high school when you were born. So I've known Jake like his whole life, but I've, growing up, you don't really know. Now I knew Brush Art was a family business, and I knew kind of what you guys did. But then as I got older and kind of started, learning more about business and stuff like that, it's pretty outstanding. You're the third generation, is that right?
Yeah. So my grandpa Doug started the company about 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And then the second generation, which would be my dad and his siblings, three of them came back in the 90s. And they're still here, and they've been here. Tim's currently the president of the company. Tom's the vice president of sales, and Heidi's leads HR. So all three of that generation are still there. And then my sister and I are actually the only ones from the third generation that have came back. And I have been here for May will be my 8th year. So
wow, that's
time
awesome.
flies. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what do you like? What's your role like in that? Or like talk about. You don't have to name specific clients, but kind of give an overview of what you guys do, and then to kind of talk about what your role is at Brush Art.
Sure. So Brush Art is a full service advertising agency. I've always been coached not to say that really, because that kind of means you're jack of all trades, master of none, typically in the marketing world. But we do our best. Probably what we do best is digital media, digital and print media. We have a really strong media team. We do video. We have a full web development team. We have several graphic designers in-house, several out-of-house. We've always done a lot of print media, whether that's like direct mail stuff or print media that goes in magazines like advertising. So really capabilities-wise, we're pretty broad. And as far as what industry we kind of belong to, I would say we're split among probably three, one being agriculture, where we're at, north central Kansas. That's always just been a really natural fit for us, and everybody has a lot of experience. I mean, our neighbors are farmers, so we know the market better than anybody else. In the 90s, when that second generation came back, we started getting into construction, and we started working for Caterpillar Machinery, so the big yellow equipment. Tim, Tom, they started to form some really strong bonds in Caterpillar, some in corporate, but a lot with the dealers. So not a lot of people know this, but there's only about 50 Cat dealers in the entire United States. So 50 dealers cover the entire country. So we do a ton of work for each of those individual dealers. And then also, industrial. We do a lot of like natural gas, oil and gas, energy. We have quite a few clients in that space. So between those three industries, that's kind of where we belong to. And then my role, it's evolved. When I kind of started, I followed Tom around a lot on the sales perspective, which was honestly amazing. That's the best way to learn, and it's fun for a younger person to get to travel and just see somebody else talk and sell the business.
Mm-hmm.
But the longer I've been here, the more I've done some different roles. So I've still do sales quite a bit, but I also do a lot of project management and account management now. So I actually have several of my own clients, and I manage their work day to day. So I'm communicating with the client every single day, helping them strategize, about their 2024 marketing plans, and then also help handle some of the project load. I have a couple project managers that help me out. But yeah, as far as the role goes, that's kind of where I live.
That's awesome. So, and you came along at an interesting time because, and I talk about this, my uncle Steve, who, is at Thanksgiving, he pulled me aside. He's like, I need you to tell me what you do for a living. You know what I mean? And it was one of those things where I was trying to explain it to him, and it's really interesting because, when you call Brush Art a full service agency, I mean, you are, but what's interesting to me is how much the definition of a full service agency has changed you've been here for, in 8 years, and it's like, it's just sped up since then for the digital growth and the change. And I know you guys are doing a lot of stuff, with, like you said, with digital media and things like that. How much have you seen, how much has that changed the operations that you've seen as far as like day to day at Brush Art? Are you guys, are you bringing on more people to help on the digital side? Is the print side slowing down? Or are they kind of working still in tandem together? Like, what are you seeing from that?
I think everything's still relevant. There's certain things that are definitely slowing down a little bit. And I know everybody always points a finger at print. Mm-hmm. I totally agree that it is slowing down, and it has changed. When I started at Brush Art 2016, I mean, every single person also was in-house, for example. Now, with the kind of the gig economy, how everything's changed, everybody's remote. Post-COVID, we have probably half the people that work remote, and then we have half the people that are in-house. So right there's one humongous change for us. But as far as, the type of work we do, yeah, it's definitely more digital. I would say our digital media work that we do is probably at the point where it's 50-50. So we're still placing quite a bit of print media. So that would include things like, advertising in magazines or trade publications or even newspaper, local stuff. It's probably still about 50-50. So print definitely hasn't went away. But I think as an agency, as a marketing partner, if you're not really familiar with, like social media platforms, digital media placement in general, like I think I would be really nervous.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree on that because my background, I went to school for TV and radio stuff. And so I'm old. So I didn't learn any of the stuff that I do now. I didn't learn any of it in school. So I'm always, I feel like, especially when you get into like smaller niche magazines or, a trade publication, or, I'm just starting to work with a client, I talked about this last night for a minute, but I've got a client that's, they create these local like magazines, and they are thriving, you know what I mean? Because I think people still, I think that the dust is going to settle, and I think traditional media is going to land. What I don't know, because my first love as a kid was radio, and audio is my first thing, and what I don't know is radio ever going to find a way to, like, I feel like print, I feel like out of home, like billboard and stuff like that. I think those things are still very relevant. I think people that sleep on them miss out on stuff. But what I don't know is like radio and TV are the same as like podcasting and digital video. You know what I mean? Whereas like print, like holding a magazine it's a different experience. And I think there's still value to that. I think people still like it. So I don't know, like, I think you, like, to your point, I think you're kind of nuts if you ignore the digital side of things and put your head in the sand and say, we've always done print, that's all we're going to do. But I think if you turn your nose up at the stuff that's been around for a long time, I think you're missing a piece of the puzzle there too, as well.
Yeah, and like one way we always do it is we always start with like the end goal in mind.
Hmm.
That's something that so we have like different kickoff documents and stuff that help guide us through that strategic thinking every time. So
Hmm.
we'll get a lot of customers that'll ask us like for a specific request. Like we'll have a customer that says, "Hey, um, can we put together a radio spot and get out, and radio the next couple months? We want to hire some technicians. We want to do that because it's what we've always done."
Right.
So when you ask them, why do you want to do that? Oh, it's what we've always done.
Yeah.
I think you have to be wary of that right there, that situation right there. So, when we get told something like that from a customer, we usually respond with, "Hey, yeah, hey, definitely want to help you out here. This is something that we can handle. However, we want to take a step back. We like to fill out like this strategic documentation first that kind of helps us know what's your goal, like what are you actually trying to accomplish with this piece of marketing and this budget." And if you start there, it's amazing how many times you'll destroy your original ideas,
Right.
and even just any idea about um, where to be necessarily.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to make those assumptions, and they hold through that strategic thinking. A lot of times, you'll erase all that, and you'll come out with something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's very hard to know. And one of the things that I think it's hard to know in this day and age, especially for people that are older like me, it's like if you came up, you know, you can ignore, like I don't like let's say you don't like TikTok, or you're not, maybe you have a Facebook account or whatever. You're a 48-year-old business owner, and your kids are on TikTok and all that. And it's hard for people to, like, a lot of times understand that, just because they're not doing something, that doesn't mean that their target audience isn't doing it. Like your
Yep.
target audience. That's why whenever people, like, I like LinkedIn. I don't. I understand why LinkedIn's important. I don't necessarily care for it very much. I know I need to be more active on there, but my thing about LinkedIn is, like, the same people that are on LinkedIn are also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Like, I don't know anybody that's like, LinkedIn is all I use. You know what I
Right.
mean? And and I think that's I don't know. It's an interesting thing to walk into somebody who's, like you said, maybe they've done, they've got a radio rep they like, they've got a station they've worked with them for decades, maybe, and to walk in and say, yeah, that's still good, but, like, let's look at something else. And, hopefully when people do employ you, that's why they're hiring you, right? Because this stuff better than they do. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but I don't know. So that kind of, so I've got a clip here that I wanted to talk to you about. And, you've talked about doing some, like, some influencer work and some like straight production work and things like that. Do you guys, and you work with some bigger businesses. So this clip right here, this is a gal that, I guess she's like let me share this here. I guess she is she's like like a LinkedIn influencer on TikTok, to say a word. But she's going to talk a little bit about brand accounts versus founder accounts. I'm gonna let this go, and then we can talk about it. I want to get your thoughts on this.
To be honest, I think marketing and sales leaders should be doing everything they can to get their employees to be posting on social media in 2024. Like, get a game, pay them, create some incentive. Building in public is free. Personal branding is free. Social media platforms prioritize personal content, not brand content. And people buy from people, not brands. Nobody wants to follow a brand account. I would much rather follow a founder account and, like, see them build in public. I actually asked my LinkedIn audience, which has a lot of sales and marketing leaders, why more organizations are not doing this, and I have a conspiracy around the answer.
So, what are your thoughts on that?
We got Winston rolling in here.
Hey, oh, look at the big bear. Oh, look. Oh, I miss mine, dude. They're the best.
The thing is, dude, I had the door shut too, but burners, they just
Yeah.
plow through it. Like, it doesn't matter.
Look at, oh God, they're just the best, dude. They're just the best.
They are. Okay, go. Yeah, no, on that, I totally agree with that video, honestly. So recently I've got with a larger client that's probably one of my first clients I've been with where we're not just working with like a vice president of marketing. right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting on calls, like monthly marketing calls, with a lot of the territory reps too. So territory sales reps. So guys that are actively like working a territory, selling the product.
Mm-hmm.
And then also like after sales is even on the calls. Like you have after sales reps. So people that are like servicing the product too.
Mm-hmm.
But like probably, the most holistic client as far as like team that I've ever worked with. And I would totally agree. So we've done a lot of marketing things, and that whole group is really active, and we have a WhatsApp channel with them, and everybody's on it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
everybody's like really bought in and really involved. And so you have a lot of guys like the territory guys, the after sales guys that are recording videos at like trade shows or on their own, and they're
Yeah.
posting them. They're posting them to this WhatsApp, and we're using them like all the time on the brand platform.
Yeah.
Now, kind of what she was saying is like, we encourage also, the individual people to have their own accounts. This client's really good at that too. They have a couple of the longer employees that have their own like Instagram accounts. Those
Mm-hmm.
Instagram accounts are sizable, they're
Yeah.
as almost as big as the brand account.
Yeah.
So I tend to definitely agree with her. People buy from people.
Yeah, I do too, and that's one of the hurdles that I face. And I'm dealing with smaller clients than you are on a typically speaking. And one of the harder things is getting people to understand that it's an ongoing process. Back in the day, you would bring in an agency, you'd bring in a brush art company, you'd say, okay, hey, we're going to put together your strategy for the year, and you guys would meet quarterly and you check in and stuff. But it wasn't this like guerrilla warfare where you've got your sales reps, like you said, out in the field creating content and sharing it. And, they're amplifying each other's message. And like, that's the way you do it right. And that's one of the things we taught when I was in Nashville. The way things work down there is you build a group of guys or a group of people that there's people that you kind of find your people within the first year you're there. And it's usually people that got to town about the same time as you. And when I was there, it was 2010, 2011. So it was like Twitter was huge. And then it was right when Instagram in 2012, 2013, Instagram started to pop off. And that was one of the things that really helped us is we were all sharing content, hanging out with each other. And so we were like growing our networks based on like, oh, well, if you like this guy, like, cause I might be playing in Kentucky more than somebody's playing in, Virginia or whatever. But if you guys are amplifying each other's messages, and I think for a lot of companies, if you've got a sales staff, especially sales, because they're typically extroverted people, who aren't afraid to jump on and, turn the phone around and talk to it and, that kind of thing. I think that businesses that are, I think they're missing an opportunity if they're not trying to activate their team in some capacity. You know what I mean? And the hurdle is for some of these guys is that especially for me, if I'm dealing with like a business owner who's like, maybe it's a $5 million business, $10 million business, smaller business, but they don't want to do the on camera work. But it's like one of the things I have to force, like, dude, you have to do this because it's your name on the truck. It's your name on the shirt. Like that's who people are going to trust at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And I think it's a good opportunity, but it's also, again, getting people comfortable in that role of actually kind of putting themselves out there,
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately the hang up usually is just that insecurity, right?
Uh-huh.
For people like, hey, I don't want to do a video. And then like all my friends see me on video and then they make fun of me, I mean, that's the big hang up. However, like I've never run into a situation where you have like too much content.
Yeah.
Like especially of like people talking, the experts, the people that know the product. You can never have too much of that.
Yeah.
And it's not embarrassing ultimately, and content's king. And I think it's a skill. So even if you are one of those employees, of the company, you're like, what's the point of me doing this?
Yeah.
Unless you're going to pay me, like, why would I put myself out there?
Yeah.
I think it's a skill that everybody should be building.
Yeah.
Like just like talking on camera, like improving your selling points. Like it's something that you should constantly be working on, because you never know, maybe with this company, maybe with another company, maybe on your own, building your own company, when that's going to spin off to another opportunity.
Dude,
I mean,
1,000%. And that's what, when I go talk to, so I've got one of my clients, they have about 40 employees, and they'll do a yearly meeting, and I'll talk to these guys. I'm like, look, here's the deal. If you're putting out content on LinkedIn, this is why it not only does it benefit the company, which it does, and it should, because you're showing your expertise, you're getting people to know, like, and trust you, you're a representative of this company, but you're also keeping your company honest, because every HR person in the country is scouring LinkedIn for talent. Yeah. They're scouring for whether it's sales or whatever. So putting yourself out there is, it's hard to, it's hard to do. It's one more thing. You know what I mean? Like, and I have the same problem. One of my clients, who I love this guy to death, and that's, he gets really nervous about his buddies just chopping him up. You know what I mean? Making fun of him because he's getting on there. And I'm like, they can make fun of you, but it's not, number one, they know they should be doing this shit too. Like, if they, you know what I mean? Like, they're lying to themselves if they think that they shouldn't be doing this stuff too. It's crazy. And I see this happen all the time. And that's what I've got. I actually have this clip. I have another clip pulled up. It addresses this exact issue. And this is an influencer girl, but I'm going to go ahead and hit this right here.
Cool.
And just listen to what this girl says. Now, I mean, obviously she's like a little hot blonde influencer, but she is, but what she's saying is true, whether you are like a young, hot female, or if you're like a middle-aged man, like, you should still be doing this stuff.
A couple years ago, my friend told me that she found out that her friend and another girl that I went to high school with were watching my TikToks for hours, making fun of me, saying how cringy I was and how I was trying too hard. And all I want to say to that is, yeah, I was cringy, and I did try really fucking hard, and look where it got me. Well, I'm in New York. I'm in New York City going to an event tonight with CoverGirl, and I wouldn't be doing that if I stopped posting because of bitches like that. Like, miserable bitches that hate people having fun and enjoying their lives. And if you're the two bitches who are watching my TikToks, I hope you still are. Like, is this better for you? Is this less cringy?
But I just think it's hilarious, because, you think that people like feel that way when they're young, but it affects, dude, everybody. Every age. They get, you get nervous. You don't like seeing yourself on camera. To your point, it's like, it's something where you've got to get used to it, and you've just got to bite the bullet and do it,
Yeah. And I, like, one of my tips on that would be, just reps, man. Just think of it as reps. You're just knocking out reps. Don't focus on one video. In marketing, there's no silver bullet. One video isn't going to explode or kill you or whatever. Right. I mean, just focus on the reps. I mean, you remember the first time that you talked in college or high school, you had to give a speech, you were nervous, Now, like, if you do any kind of office work, you've been on enough Teams calls and Zooms calls. It's like, you don't get nervous.
Right.
Right. You can be nervous. You do it too often. You should treat content creation the same way. The first time you start creating content, you will be nervous. You'll be like, this is weird, and I don't really like talking in front of a camera, but do it for 6 months. You won't be nervous anymore. Do it daily or a couple times a week. It's no big deal.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing that I see a lot of people, I think they miss on is the idea that they undersell their expertise. A lot of people that I know to the point where they're like, yeah, why would anybody listen to me? It's like, because, and I feel like it's a lot of it, people that are siloed in a certain industry, right? To where they're like, oh, okay, like, let's say you're a personal trainer, and you're like, yeah, there's other people out there that are, that are better, more accomplished, whatever. But the reality of it is, there's a million people that know less than you. Like, people they always undersell their own expertise on stuff, especially, I mean, you've been in the business for 8 years. That's not really long in the big picture, but look at how much stuff you've already learned, and think how much you're going to know 10 years from now, and it's just one of those things where it's one of the, you've got to get yourself to the point where you're comfortable doing this stuff, like you said, and it's all about making it so that the only way to get comfortable is to do it.
Yeah. Another tip I've heard about that too is you should be trying to teach someone 2 years back from yourself. So try to teach yourself something you didn't know 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And once you start to think about all the stuff you didn't know 2 years ago, it becomes a lot easier, and just how math works. I mean, the pie is huge. There's so many people out there. So
Yeah.
you're going to be talking to somebody who definitely needs that knowledge.
Yeah. And that's the hardest thing is getting started, and I joked before we started this thing. I'm like, Jake's like, he's like, you said to me, do you care if I cuss? I'm like, look, the 6 people that listen to this aren't going to give a shit, but that's the reality of it. You know what I mean? Like you've got to know that. And for me, as much as like I've put this off, I've, as far as making my own content and doing this podcast, which I love doing, but it's, it's one more thing. And it's like, but you put it off. You just have to sit there and say, okay, like I know because I've seen it work for my other clients. You've seen it work for clients. Like you start putting stuff out there and it's, it's not, you're not trying to become an influencer in most cases in business, and especially like, I had a quarterly meeting yesterday with one of my clients, and that's the thing. So we go over all the analytics, we're looking at LinkedIn and TikTok and stuff. And I'm like, well, this is, especially when you're looking at, if you're a small, medium-sized business, the way I look at like TikTok and Instagram Reels, especially now for these guys, and I told them yesterday, I said, look, you can put your resources towards getting somebody in-house working on engagement on these platforms, because that's really like putting the content out is one piece of it. The other piece is actually getting on there and actively engaging in, in the community, that whatever community you're trying to serve, whether it's, if you're trying to talk to insurance agents or car dealers or whoever the hell you're talking to, you need to get in there and be social. But with the way these platforms are working now, like TikTok and, and Instagram Reels especially is pushed into that, since they're all interest-based, it's not about amassing a following on that platform. Because even if you're, so my client, they've got an office in Kansas City and Manhattan that I'm speaking about. I'm like, let's say you get 50,000 TikTok followers. Like that looks great and that's awesome. But if these people are in Florida, then who gives a shit? You know what I mean? It's not like back in the day where the people that were following you were most likely, people that were following you for a reason. They were around you. Now it's like people that have found you because they're interested in whatever topic you're talking about. So even though, like I'm like, okay, we need to focus on getting the content. We're targeting people based on email addresses and things like that. And then we've got the kind of like the CYA content to be like, so if somebody looks on your TikTok account, it's active and it's working. But I don't necessarily feel like, if you're a local business trying to get people, unless you're trying to sell something if you're selling an e-com product or whatever, where people can buy from anywhere, then if you're selling a course or something like that, then yeah, you want the biggest following you can get on any of these platforms. But if you're selling physical, tangible goods in a retail store, if you're selling a service in a local area, the service-based algorithm, like you need to be there because people go there, but you also need to focus your efforts on places where you can get in front of your people directly. And that's why I've like really like the email marketing thing to me is like I know these people are going to get this. You know what I mean? It's an engaged audience versus now when you post on Instagram or Facebook, even if you put a bunch of money behind it, the people that are following you might not even see your message. You know what I mean? So that game has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, I totally agree. Having an audience of 2,000, but it's all people that are relevant to you and care about your brand is way more than important than 50,000 that are just like random high school kids, whoever on the internet, Yeah. And they like your page because it's you did a trendy video. It's way more important to be going after your relevant audience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So last night we were, chatting up a little bit, and one of the things that you guys have done a little bit more of recently, and I think you're starting to engage more, is influencer marketing for some of your clients. Talk to me about how you're utilizing influencer and just what that whole experience is like, because it is, especially with the rise of micro influencers right now, it's number one, it's something that people can do. It's something that businesses of all shapes and sizes can reach out, because you've got people that have sizable audiences in every demographic. It doesn't just have to be like skincare or, a mom blog type thing. It's like everything. So kind of talk about how you guys are using influencer marketing and what your experience has been like with that.
Sure. Yeah. And let me just preface this by saying It's pretty new to us too. So I'm not coming at this question like an expert. I don't want you to think that. I don't want to get crucified for anything I answer here. But in my opinion, from my perspective, the influencer space is still like the wild, wild west right now.
Yeah.
Like nobody has that stuff clocked. Everybody's doing something a little bit differently. But over the last couple years, we've talked to quite a few influencers of all different sizes. So we've talked to guys that I would consider an influencer with 20,000 YouTube followers. And then I, talked last week with a guy on TikTok that has 1 million followers.
Yeah.
So very wide range of influencers that we've talked with, but how that's applied to businesses. So one of my clients, we've done a project where we took their equipment. They manufacture ag equipment. We took that equipment and we ran it on several farms. So we traveled with the equipment and we ran it on farm A, and then we traveled to farm B and ran it on farm B, and then farm C, D, E, F, So we ran on 8 different farms. Now, what's the kicker there? I mean, 1 million people have done that. Each one of these farms was an influencer. They were an influencer in the agriculture space with that in that range. So some had 50,000 followers, some had 500,000 followers in the ag space. And those are large for the ag space. I mean, the ag space is very niche.
Yeah.
You may be going like, I didn't even know there was influencers in the ag space. There's influencers in every space. That's what's so crazy.
Yeah.
But we were running this equipment on those influencers' farms, and we were doing this for free. We didn't pay any of them. We did this. The value for them was to actually run the equipment on their farm for free. That's the value for them. The value for us is the awareness. We asked them to just post on their preferred social media platform. We didn't have it super formalized. It wasn't like a contract, like sign here, you have to do this, this, and this. No, it was really like we formed these relationships over the years at like trade shows and like just meeting these influencers. And it's like, hey, we're going to do something cool and new. Not a lot of people have done before. Do you want to be a part of it? And they're like, sure. Super heavy logistics load on our end, on the back end. We were figuring out how to ship the equipment. We were figuring out like logistically the schedule. We had to work around weather. We had to work around all that stuff. So logistically, it was a super heavy project. And that's why I don't think a lot of people have even attempted to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it paid off. It was an awesome project.
Yeah. So there's so many layers there. So these are were the influencers actually doing the farming on this equipment? Were they actually, so they were actually driving, it was a combine or whatever. They're the ones that are out there actually doing the work, and then they're kind of sharing their experience with it. Is that kind of how that's kind of how content shaped out, right?
Yeah. So all of these influencers in the ag space are also farmers or live on a farm, or their family has a farm, In one case, we didn't run it on the guy's farm, but we ran it on his friend's farm.
Yeah. A farm he had access to, essentially.
Farm he had access to, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so you knew these guys. You didn't have to go like do a deep dive to try to find them. These are guys that you had known, just you had relationships with them going into it. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I feel like you almost have to. It's much harder just to cold call, you know? And the larger influencers too are kind of like, they've had a lot of experience working with brands, so they almost have like a rate card. You know what I mean? They're a small business, full blown business.
100%. We've got, and I talked to you about this last night. I've been working on a project where we basically brought a product to market in November, and it's a different cousin of mine. I mean, it's like a family business, right? But he's been working on this thing for like 6 years, and they brought the product to market in November of this year, but it's seasonal. It's a fireplace. It's a fireplace unit that stops drafts and stuff. And they engaged, they had do the cold call thing where they engaged influencers. I'm here to tell you, and they were going after, because they'd sold a handful of these, so we knew we wanted to talk to women in, Gen X women essentially is who were buying these so far. And so we found, and we got it exact, like what you said, we got a rate card, you know what I mean? And the prices on these things are incredible. And what I don't, the campaign ran yesterday, so the jury is still out on whether or not this is going to work out. And like you saying it's the wild, wild west is actually 100% accurate, because I think, you can find any and all types of people. And it's really, if you've got that connection, you don't, like what you guys were able to bring value to these influencers in a way without paying them, a large sum of money. And they were it was everybody won in that situation, you know? And I think that the door is open for that, but it's really hard, especially if you're looking at, they've got these, and I was going to ask you if you didn't have personal relationships with these guys or with these gals or whoever they were, like how you found them, because that was the other challenge when we were looking for influencers. There's websites where you can, like, they've got people listed out, and to me, they all kind of seemed like hot garbage, like the numbers were all off and everything was, I feel like somebody has been like teaching courses on how to become an influencer and how to, do this. And so people are signing up on these websites, even though they, their engagement is less than stellar in most cases that I was looking at, so finding those people that influencer space, I think it's going to continue to grow, even though people are saying it's the end of the influencer. I think it might be the end of the full-time influencer, somebody that's just that's all they do. But I feel like everybody is going to have enough of not everybody, but there's going to be enough people with enough of a following that can make an impact that you could do stuff on a, maybe not a super micro scale, but, somebody's got 10,000 followers and you're a local business. That's, especially if they're somewhat localized, you can get make a lot of hay with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, I don't see influencers going away. I just see it, being coined maybe a different term, but the people are on, like, where people are at, they're on the social platforms, man. That's where everybody's at. And so they're following someone,
Yeah.
And whether they're following, a guy with 1 million followers, or whether they're following, 5 people from their area, that grew up around them, that are kind of talking about different things in their area, they're following somebody.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, from the influencer's perspective too, I've learned a lot just like in these relationships with these influencers. They need content too.
Yeah.
So like, they have to keep the content wheel going. I mean, they're making money from the platforms. So they're getting paid from YouTube or TikTok or whatever. I've heard a huge range of numbers, but let's say you're making $3 or $4 grand a month from TikTok. You better keep that flywheel going, man. I mean, that's like you said, that's not really that much money. I mean, I think a lot of people think of these influencers as like a celebrity in Hollywood, like they're completely loaded rich. They don't even have to do anything except talk on a camera. I don't see it like that at all. I think they're like basically a small business, and there's a lot of pressure. Like, you have to keep that content up. You have to keep it creative. As soon as you lose engagement, people leave. There isn't near as much loyalty anymore. There's so many sources of entertainment and education. Why would you stay with one if it's not super beneficial, super funny? I mean, people want the funniest thing anymore.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And there was earlier this year, and I had a video on it, but there were a lot of big YouTubers quitting and walking away from the platform. And the common thread I would watch these videos, but the common thread was, I started out doing this because I thought it'd be cool. But to your point, what you said, it is a small business, because what people don't realize is, and you've started doing some stuff on your own, editing these things, you don't have to be trying to get a film to Sundance, but you have to do the editing, and all that stuff takes time, and it takes effort, it takes skill. And then your audience will, eventually expect you to level up your game. And like you said, it never stops. And that's what a lot of these people are just getting burnt out, because it's not like a band back in the day who put out a record, you tour for a year and a half, and then you take a year off and kind of recharge your battery and, get your shit together. No, it's 24/7, 365. And anytime, if you stop creating, then your numbers dip and your payment dips. And it really is. It's a lot harder than people realize,
So like I was talking to one of the TikTok influencers, full time, she's a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how she's making her full-time money, but it's important enough to her to have 2 or 3 other things going,
Mm-hmm.
So she's grinding. It's not celebrity like at all. So like she has a TikTok with 600,000 or 700,000 followers.
Wow. Yeah.
And she made the decision like, hey, I'm going to pick up YouTube too.
Mm-hmm.
And like the cadence for these things, for these people on TikTok, like what I've heard, and seen work is like they're putting out 1 video a day on TikTok. So every single day without miss, they're putting out a video. And on YouTube, it's usually 1 video a week.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more editing that goes into it. It's usually longer form.
Mm-hmm.
But like, think about that. Like this girl is so busy with 1 full-time job. 2, she's a large, what I would consider a large influencer on TikTok. And she made the decision like, hey, I'm going to pick up YouTube. It's worth it to spend, a couple nights a week editing for me to try to get another platform going.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's wild. I mean, and that's, I talk about podcasting because my clients, the biggest hurdle I run into is like, to your point, it's like, if you want to be effective, you've got to have, it's a volume play, right? Regardless of whether you're trying to be an influencer or you're trying to put content out there, if you want to make an impact, you've got to put out content at scale. It's not the idea that you can, create a brand video that might cost $25,000 or $50,000, which is awesome. But that brand video, and like, you still need that because you've got to have that on your website. You've got to have
shelf
it.
life,
but the shelf life is the same as a video you shoot on your phone,
Yeah.
And so for me to go to my clients, I'm like, okay, my objective is to say, okay, how can we create the most quality content that's not just garbage throwaway stuff, but in a short amount of time for you? And that's the podcast thing. What I like about it is like, we'll have a conversation for 45 minutes. And from that, you'll get, I don't know, anywhere between, generally speaking, I'll get like 15 to 25 videos out of this, whether it's me or me with somebody else. And that's a really good use of my time. But I say that, and even though I know what I'm doing as far as editing, I've been editing videos for my whole life, essentially, it still takes a ton of time to do that stuff. And that's what people don't realize until they get into it. And they're like, oh, I mean, even if, I saw a gal on TikTok and she was doing everything on her phone. She was editing on her phone, and which is how, that's the best way to do it if you're on TikTok, because if you're editing within the app, if you use the app for more stuff, the platform, the algorithm's going to favor you. You know what I mean? If you're actually using TikTok to edit your videos and all that stuff, which a lot of people don't realize. But this gal was talking about how she shoots and edits her videos in 30 minutes. So you think about that and then talk about what you just said, which is putting out a video a day. Well, that right there, if you do that over a week, I mean, you're looking at an extra 4 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That you have to have. And that's kind of knowing what you're doing. That's
I would agree.
And then not only do you have to have the technical side of things figured out, but then, like you said, these guys need content, coming up with ideas, like, what the hell are we going to talk about? You know what I mean? That's going to be relevant to people. That is incredibly difficult unless you're doing like, if you're doing like a news cycle thing, where you're talking about politics or sports and even sports, like you have lulls in seasons and whatnot, where you're just like, I look at some of these guys, I'm like, I don't know how they do it. They fill 4 hours a day on the radio, on talk radio. They just run their mouth for 4 hours. Like, that is incredibly difficult. But yeah, it's interesting to see what people are willing to do. Like this gal who's busting her ass. I mean, being a full-time farmer is no joke of a job, regardless of what kind of farming you're doing. But then to basically take on a second job in order to do this. And that's why I think a lot of people, it's easy to get burnt out because it's not a project where I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to build a house and then I'm done. And then I'll go build another house. You know what I mean?
It's another job.
Yeah, it is. And it's a never ending job. It's a never ending cycle if you're doing it right, or if you want to do it right, you know?
Yeah. It's another job for sure.
All right. Well, hey man, I appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to touch on that we didn't get into?
Man, I think we covered quite a bit. I don't know, when you go back through and look at this stuff, you might be like, we talked about 3 things, but I feel like we covered quite a bit, and I think it would be good to do another one, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jacob, I appreciate your time, man, and have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you sometime.
All right. Appreciate it, Ryan. Thank you for the opportunity.
That's going to do it for episode 11. Thanks so much for listening. If you like what you heard, be a friend and tell a friend. Rate, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stop selling and start telling.